Welcome in, everybody, to the TPT podcast. Today, we have a big time guest for you, former Kansas City Chiefs quarterback, Tyler Thigpen. Tyler, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Absolutely, man. Just thank you for having me on. Apologize if things didn't work out yesterday, but looking forward to talking some football. I don't get to do it often. I got two little girls now, so definitely when I get the chance, I look forward to it.
Yeah, it's good to have a former Chiefs on, especially what's going on with the Chiefs, how everything's been going. Just had the draft, won the Super Bowl. Just a lot going on in Kansas City in general. You know, what is that like being a former Chief, seeing when, coming from when you were on the team, how the state of the Chiefs was, through the ups and downs of, those early 2000s Chiefs teams. So, the Chiefs now, like when you see the Chiefs, like, now, what is like some of the first things that just come to your mind and just the thought process of the organization right now?
I mean, they're clicking on all cylinders. I mean, as far as, it's one of those things when you hear the Chiefs, I mean, they're being considered as Super Bowl contenders every single year now. So that's exciting, especially when you get closer to football season, you're looking forward to it. Anytime you can watch one of their games, you just look forward to it because, they're playing good football all around. And, that's just something always fun to watch and just excited for it. Obviously, going through my years, definitely some ups and downs, but ever since Patrick's got there, man, they've just and Coach Andy Reid, they've turned it around, and it's one of those things that's very exciting to watch.
Yeah, and it's almost a complete culture change since 2013. Since he got there, it's just been winning season after winning season. As here in a minute, we'll go through the schedule, but more going on to the offseason of the Super Bowl and what transpired last season. What do you think the thing was that just clicked for the Kansas City Chiefs, bringing in a lot of these rookies and a lot of these guys? Why did it click so much for the Chiefs this season and their rookies? Is it coaching? Is it Mahomes? What do you think it is?
I mean, I think it's definitely, obviously with Patrick at the helm, I mean, you're definitely have a chance every single game, which is awesome. But as far as, kind of getting those guys out, the ego, not that there's anything wrong with Tyreek Hill, but it's kind of like one of those things where Patrick didn't have to necessarily throw to one guy. He could spread the ball around. And there was nobody with any egos. If Tyreek was one of those that's not getting the ball, he might be somebody that comes out into the media more or less saying, I want the ball. And not that you as an offense, you're going to try to develop plays and get somebody like him the ball. But at the end of the day, when you got that many weapons on offense and you don't have any big name guys, so it's everybody's contributing. Everybody is doing their part, that you don't have any egos that some of those people have to check at the door. So that's always good. And, you got a guy like Travis Kelce, you're going to get him the ball no matter what. I mean, the guy knows how to get open. I play with a great tight end like Tony Gonzalez, a Hall of Famer, obviously. But,
right.
Somebody like him, you always knew where he was at. You always knew he was going to get open. You always trusted him. I mean, and that's exactly, you can see that in Patrick with Travis or whatever. But, you've got a guy, or you got Andy Reid, an offensive mind guy that, look at the plays he just draws up week in and week out. And when you've got, like I said, somebody like Patrick that just is perfect for that offense between, he can sit back there and be a pocket passer if he needs to be, or he can extend the play with his feet. But one thing I like about Patrick, and it's something I learned early on, is, when he takes off running, he's not becoming a runner in the sense of a running back. He takes off running to extend the play to throw the ball. And then if he gets to the line of scrimmage, essentially he can make a play with his feet. So, as long as they keep him healthy, good things will continue for the Chiefs.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to ask you. You were a mobile quarterback. You're second all time in rushing yards for a Chiefs as a quarterback. Is that something that, you see some quarterbacks, if they don't have it, they're taking off? Patrick Mahomes is a little bit different. He'll take off, but, there's times he won't cross that line of scrimmage yet, and he kind of finds a guy. Is that something where, defenses are still not adjusted to when they see a guy kind of take off from the pocket and then he's still looking downfield? How much is that an advantage for a guy like that, especially with the receivers he has?
Well, you can't cover it in a sense. I mean, unless you're just going to use one guy to spine the whole game. And then at that point, you're not getting a double team or, whatever it might be.
Right.
So for somebody like Patrick that can extend the play, like you said, I mean, and get outside of the pocket when it breaks down, because unfortunately, it's not going to be a perfect pocket every single play. We know that. I mean, he's taken
Right.
he's taken some hits over the years, and he just, keeps getting back up. But, when you get outside the pocket and you make it look like you're running, that DB turns around and sees that. His first reaction, he's got to say, all right, I'm either going to come up and stop him or I'm going to stay on my guy. And in that case, that's
Right.
Patrick's job to say, at that point is that's Patrick's, to make that decision. All right, I'm going to take off and run, or whatever decision, depending on. But then, a lot of times is the way that the Chiefs have their big plays. A lot of times is when you've got a Travis Kelce's running a corner route and the guy covers him perfectly. Well, next thing you know, that guy turns around to look back to see what's going on, and then Travis has already broke back inside because Patrick's extending the play. And so those are broken plays to me, or you can have perfect coverage the entire route. But when it's a broken play, as far as Travis or Patrick extending the play, it's almost impossible to cover that because you just don't. There's no rhyme or reason whether he's going to go left or right as far as the receiver or tight end. So it's, as a DB or a linebacker, it's almost impossible to cover.
Yeah, and that's something you mentioned earlier with some of the schemes of that. Just obviously, you have the talent level of Mahomes and Travis Kelce doing that, but you also have a guy in Andy Reid who, most coaches with the plays that Patrick Mahomes does, or some of the throws, I should say, Patrick Mahomes does, you're coming out of the game. I think if you were throwing some of those plays, Herm Edwards would say, let's go. You're sitting over here. But is it going to change a little bit this season because they did move on from Eric Bieniemy, or Eric Bieniemy moved on to the Washington Commanders? Now they have Matt Nagy. Or is it more or less Andy Reid is still going to be the guy calling the plays and Matt Nagy is the guy who implements stuff during the week? What's your thought process on how they implement plays?
I mean, I definitely think as far as with Eric Bieniemy, he was a running backs coach when I got drafted to Minnesota. So he was Adrian Peterson's running back coach.
Right.
And as far as a coach, I mean, when he came in, Adrian Peterson, he struggled essentially to learn protections. And I tell you what, Coach Bieniemy took it upon himself to say, hey, I'm going to make sure our first round pick is going to be able to protect our quarterback when it comes to pass protection, because you have to do that as a running back. You can't be, if you can't pass protect, then every time he comes out the game, guess what? It's a pass play kind of thing. So,
right.
He took it upon himself. But honestly, you've seen it over the years. He did it with Michael Vick when he was in Philly or whatever. Andy Reid's always been a mastermind when it comes to offenses. So, somebody like Eric Bieniemy, who's been around, he's been in different offenses. I do think they will miss some of his input, but I still think at the end of the day, it was Andy Reid's offense that, essentially he was the one calling the plays kind of thing. If Coach Bieniemy was the one and maybe Andy Reid's saying, all right, let's run this play. And then next thing you know, Bieniemy's like, all right, play 22 or whatever. And so Patrick's reading it off his wristband kind of thing. He might have been the title of the offensive coordinator, and I could be completely wrong, but I really truly think that it was still Andy Reid's offense. So I don't think I think they'll miss, his mind of the way, him bringing whatever to the table as far as his experience. But at the end of the day, I think I don't think they'll struggle or lose too much in that aspect.
Right. And Matt Nagy, he's been in this system. He was with Mahomes last year as his QB coach. And that's the thing. At times when the offense wasn't clicking, it was, Eric Bieniemy was running the plays, or, this week Andy Reid was running the plays. So is it normal that the head coach does run all the offensive plays, or is it usually just depending on when you played? Is that typically that happens?
No, typically it's always, as far as, when I was, I would say like in Kansas City, when I was there, Herm Edwards was a defensive coach. So
right.
Chan Gailey was the offensive coordinator. And, he was essentially calling the plays down to the quarterback coach, and then the quarterback coach was, relaying it to us. But then when I was with Buffalo, with Coach Gailey, he was the head coach, but he was still calling the plays. He was the one that was still behind all that. So that's, I don't, I remember last year those stories like, we don't know if, Bieniemy or if Coach Reid's calling the plays. Right. But at the end of the day, I think that's just the way the media is just sitting there. All right, they weren't clicking this week, so let's just run with this story and say that, Andy Reid was calling the plays last week and they called, Eric Bieniemy was running this week. I don't think that would be something. I think if Andy really, that might be something you do in the preseason. Like, hey, I'm going to let Coach Bieniemy call all the plays in the preseason. and then see how it goes to where maybe I can, as a head coach, step back. But anywhere Andy Reid's ever been, he's been mainly the signal caller when it comes to that.
Right. And a lot of people, may have concerns because Matt Nagy didn't really work out in Chicago coming over to the Kansas City Chiefs. Some head coaches aren't meant to be head coaches. Some guys are OCs. They're great OCs. We see that all the time in football. And do you think that, should Chiefs fans be concerned about Matt Nagy, if he is calling plays this season?
I don't think. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I would be blown away if Andy Reid at this point turns it over to him.
Right.
I don't think he's done maybe enough to earn his trust. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I'm not in the locker room or in the meeting rooms and on the field with them right now. So maybe he's blown Andy Reid away as far as that. But Andy Reid's been doing it for so long, he pretty much in his mind knows exactly what he's running. But the good thing that he always does is he's always switching it up. And just when defenses think that, he's running the ball, next thing you know, he's throwing the ball, or vice versa. So Andy's always done a great job from that. But, when you've got a guy like Patrick Mahomes at the quarterback position, nothing's impossible.
Right.
And no play call is off the table. And you have the confidence in him. If you've got a young rookie guy that, is going in to start his first game or his first season, or, even a backup guy, you're not going to call the same plays that you called for Patrick, that you're calling for those guys, because that's the trust essentially that Andy Reid has in Patrick Mahomes with the amount of chemistry they've had over the past, 6 years or whatever it is. So, I mean, that's just one of those things to where, great coaches are going to adapt to the quarterback at hand. If you've got a guy that's more of a, Chad Henne last year, he was more of a pocket guy. He's not going to be your guy running around. So I imagine he's calling different plays for Chad than he was essentially for Patrick.
Right. Yeah, and speaking of some of the quarterbacks, as we get into that, and there's going to be some new quarterbacks in this room as Chad Henne retired. He had a great career with the Kansas City Chiefs. Was able to win a playoff game for the Kansas City Chiefs. He moves on. They bring in another veteran, Blaine Gabbert, former Jacksonville Jaguar. Then you have Shane Buechele, who's on the team last year. If Patrick Mahomes, God forbid, went down in a game, there's a little bit of a talk in the Chiefs kingdom, who is going to be the number 2 guy on the roster? A veteran like Blaine Gabbert, or you have a second-year guy in Shane Buechele. What's something Shane Buechele, because, Blaine Gabbert's been around a while. He's been around. What's something Shane Buechele would have to do to insert himself as a number 2, as he's kind of been the number 3 quarterback the last couple of years? Because you were, a guy that climbed his way up on the depth chart in 2008 and became the starting quarterback in that season. So what are some of the things he has to do that same thing?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, he's got to prove to himself or prove to the coaches, out there at practice. That's during OTAs, during mini camps, and then in training camp. You've got to prove to your coaches that, hey, we trust and know that, you're a second-year guy. But, hey, at the end of the day, if things fall into your lap because something happens to Patrick, we know that for a fact that you can take over this offense and command it. You might not be the quarterback like that Patrick Mahomes is, but at the end of the day, we've got to have trust in you that until we can get Patrick back healthy, you can command this offense and lead this team and win us some games to get us down the road, essentially. But, that's one of those things to where, as far as a lot of these teams that, for instance, for me, when I was a rookie, it was cheap to keep me. So a veteran ended up getting cut at the time. And then vice versa. Now, when I became a veteran, they ended up keeping a rookie in my place when I got cut there my last year in Cleveland. So it's one of those things to where, if Blaine Gabbert and the other guy, and what was his name?
Shane Buechele.
If they are, neck and neck, it might be one of those things. All right, we can just free up some cap space and cut Blaine. But depending on what their contract situation is, he might be already guaranteed more or less as the number 2 guy.
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot of moving parts this offseason. That'll be interesting to see as the preseason gets closer and closer where some of those guys lie. And like you said, the offense is not going to be structured the same as when you have a guy like Patrick Mahomes in there. But speaking about the preseason and some of the OTAs that have been happening, you got a lot of rookies that are coming in to the Kansas City Chiefs offense. And one of them is a receiver, Rashid Rice from SMU. what do you think the number one thing a rookie wide receiver can do to implement himself in the Andy Reid offense? It's a very hard thing, but what is the number one thing a rookie wide receiver can do to try to get reps in Andy Reid's offense?
Well, first thing is, you got to obviously you've proven yourself because you were drafted second round, correct? So obviously your play is for one has gotten you up there to get you drafted second round. The second thing you got to do is you got to hit your playbook right off the bat, and you got to show Patrick Mahomes that, hey, I'm going to go out there when the play's called, I'm running my route, I'm going to be where I set up or where I'm supposed to be, and you got to build that trust. And knowing somebody like Patrick, he's going to sit there and put in the reps to make sure and talk the lingo that essentially he's known for so long, and he's got to teach him, essentially. So, I put a lot on, I wouldn't say put a lot on Patrick, but I know being the player that Patrick is, if they expect this guy to be a player, they're going to be the reps and doing everything, and when you have a number one guy and your number two receiver, anytime Patrick Mahomes the rotation might be like, all right, Patrick's going with your number one guy. And then next thing you know, the third string guy comes up as quarterback. And then you got your number two receiver that pops up. Guess what? You're going to be rotating Patrick. Get back up here and throw to, so-and-so kind of thing, from that standpoint. So I think the biggest thing the biggest adjustment for a rookie, especially as a receiver, is learning, your formations, your plays, and just, everybody runs a slant pretty much the same way. Everybody runs a curl pretty much the same way. That's not the problem that he's going to have of running routes. The problem, or the biggest thing for him, is going to be the learning gap, essentially from, college to the NFL.
Yeah. And again, a good class coming in for the Kansas City Chiefs and Andy Reid. I mean, again, it is hard to start in his offense as a rookie. There's only been a couple rookies to really have a big time year in his offense. Tyreek Hill, Deshaun Jackson, those are big time players for the Kansas City Chiefs. And, they're still trying to build this wide receiver room. And a lot of people, from the outside may say, well, they don't have that DeAndre Hopkins. They don't have that guy where, they need to go get Hopkins. They need to go get this guy because they don't have that number one guy. Is the receiver on the team, you really see the Chiefs that is going to elevate the team, or do you think it's going to just be a collective group like last year?
I think it's going to be a collective group. I mean, I think if you can get Justin Ross back healthy, I watched him a lot back when he played at Clemson. Somebody like him that's just as physically gifted as he is, that hasn't gotten a chance with his neck injury to actually get out there on the field, to showcase his talent. But, at the end of the day, you don't have that big name DeAndre Hopkins in the room. So therefore it's like, who do I more or less, do I double team one guy because he had a good week last week? It's kind of like one of those things to where, you're probably going to try to, double team Travis Kelce as best you can between a linebacker and a safety. But at the end of the day, I just, there's no egos in that receiver room. And, when you have that, it's one of those things to where Patrick can throw it, 10 times at one guy, one game, and then the next game, not even throw it one time. And that guy's not going to say nothing, kind of thing. When you don't have any egos like that, I mean, a prime example of, the first name that comes to mind is Odell Beckham Jr. If you don't target him, and when you have those big time guys, sometimes you try to force the ball to them. And, a lot of time, more times than not, you end up making mistakes as far as trying to force a ball and get it to somebody because they're going to be upset if they're not getting the football.
Yeah, and you played with a guy in Dwayne Bowe, a very good receiver, a guy who, he's a character, let's just say that.
Yeah.
So is that a thing as a quarterback, is when a guy's a big time player and, you're not really in a locker room where, like the Kansas City Chiefs, where the guys aren't worried about getting theirs. They know that the ball's going to come to their way, and the culture the Chiefs have kind of built. How much is that an advantage? Just being a quarterback in itself, you don't have to worry about that guy after that 3 and out or whatever it may be coming to you and saying, I was open, you didn't feed me the ball, but next time I'll hit you. That's what happens with the Chiefs. How much of an advantage is that?
I mean, I think it's a big advantage for Patrick because it's like at the end of the day, I think every player essentially is an option on the table. And I think it helps Andy Reid when calling plays. He's not trying to form an offense around these not gimmicky plays, but the plays of like Tyreek Hill, making him on the move and kind of, things like that. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's like, you've got a collective group of guys that can play football. They've made the roster essentially. And at the end of the day, hey, we're good with our 1 through 4 guy. And at the end of the day, those are going to be the guys that we're going to roll with. and I'm going to call the plays accordingly. And now Patrick's going to just take what the team or take what the defense gives him. Because a lot of times, the defense may give you that check down to the running back, but you see a guy like Dwayne Bowe or, whatever it might be. Like when I was playing, you want to get them the ball because they're playmakers. They'll go up and get the ball for you kind of thing. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's just one of those things that they don't have that big name guy. And I think that helps Patrick in the end.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, of course, you're going to have Travis Kelce out there. But again, Travis Kelce, at least the last 5 years since he's been a younger player, hasn't been a me guy. He knows the ball is going to come to his way. He knows he's a great receiver. He is confident enough in his style of play that he's going to get open, and he's confident in his quarterback that if I'm open, he's going to find,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
I think it's good having a guy like Travis Kelce, even though Travis Kelce is one of the top, or if not top 2 tight end in the league. There might be a game where he doesn't even have a catch or something like that because he knows more or less, hey, I know this team's focusing on me. And Andy Reid might be like, hey, knowing Andy Reid, he might be like, hey, you're a decoy on this play. But the thing is Travis understands that his mind is he understands football and understands how to get open. But hey, he's going to do everything he can to make it look like he's actually running the route to try and win. But all it is a distraction because he knows he's double teamed kind of thing. So those are good things when you've got guys that can learn football and learn, the understanding of leverages and, coverages, being able to see the coverages, those are big things. And I think that's something probably Patrick does really well as far as being able to coach these guys up during the week and understanding what the defenses are going to give them.
Yeah. Of course, he played with a great tight end in Tony Gonzalez, probably the greatest to ever do it. Having that security blanket for Patrick Mahomes, we may not have the Stephon Diggs or Jamar's, whoever it may be, but if you have a guy like Travis Kelce, and it seems like every year he's supposed to have a drop off, but he just keeps getting, better and better and better. And at that third down, boom, he's going to be right where he was supposed to. So, he doesn't really have to rely on, a big time receiver, but you can get it done with Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, and a lot of these guys.
And I think the biggest thing is they always use that, saying as a tight end as your blanket kind of thing is, but at the end of the day, the matchups is really what your quarterback, what you're trying to exploit. If you've got a guy like Travis Kelce, there's not many safeties and not many linebackers in the league that can cover that guy. So, automatically, all right, I've got an advantage on this matchup. They're not going to really bring a cornerback inside to cover him because he's a better guy he's a better cover guy because Travis is bigger. He'll just body that guy and that guy won't even stand a chance. So, off the bat that really and truly, if it's one-on-one coverage, he's probably going to be favored going to Travis because he knows that. But a lot of times he's not, in the sense of that it's not one-on-one. He's ended up getting double teamed. So at that point, you look his way, kind of get the defense to move towards him and then make a play, throw it elsewhere.
Yeah, as long as Travis Kelce keeps making those big-time plays for the Chiefs as we move into some big-time games for the Kansas City Chiefs as we look at their schedule here a little bit. The season is right around the corner. I cannot wait. It's almost already July. Then we'll be into August and right into the NFL season. Starting off the season hot with a team that a lot of people have been talking about, the Detroit Lions. They ended up getting hot at the end of the season last year. In Arrowhead, week 1 versus Detroit. I don't know if you know too much about Detroit and some of the things they're building. They got some good players there. How do you feel the matchup is going to be with Detroit in week 1 in Kansas City?
I think the biggest thing that right off the bat, you're going to have the 12th man essentially in Kansas City with Arrowhead. That place is,
right.
Ever since, it was, electric when I played and, we were 2-4 or 2-16 or 2-14 or whatever it was.
Right.
But now with the way that they're winning, they're coming off the Super Bowl. They're going to be unveiling the banner. As far as, I think all the advantage, the first game of the season is on Kansas City. I think all eyes are going to be on them in the sense of, you're coming off a Super Bowl win. What are you going to do this year? But Detroit, they've definitely turned it around. Coach Dan Campbell, he was actually a quality control guy when I was in Miami, when I played there for those 2 years. And he was a phenomenal guy. Did I ever think he'd be a head coach? No, but guess what? There he is in Detroit. And he's definitely changed the culture around there. I don't think you'll have what it takes to beat the Chiefs the first game, but I definitely think he's turning things around there. But look forward to seeing that with Kansas City and the unveiling of the banner, because as soon as that comes out, I think the whole atmosphere in Kansas City is just going to be crazy from the start. And as long as Kansas City offense can keep the crowd in a sense by scoring points and allowing the defense to get out there with the noise, I definitely think they've got the advantage, Kansas City.
Yeah, and let's remember the last time the banner was unveiled, that was in 2020. The Chiefs won the Super Bowl in 2019, but the COVID pandemic, there wasn't a lot of fans in the crowd. So now you're gonna have a full Arrowhead seeing that banner, and as much as anybody does how loud it gets in Arrowhead. And the Lions are building a pretty good team. They'll be up there with a former team you were drafted by, the Minnesota Vikings, to see what they can bring to them. But in Arrowhead, week 1, and Patrick Mahomes, we know what he is in September. And that's something I want to ask you real quick before we look on the next couple of games in September. What do you think is so different about Mahomes in September? Why is he so good in September?
I think a lot of times it's kind of one of those things to where, as far as offense, defenses really are coming off a training camp where they essentially have watched their teams or played against their teams all year or against more or less their defense. And then now it's kind of one of those things to where I think in September, really, those teams don't have that game film on Patrick. Even though they've got it from previous years, it seems like every year Patrick just comes out with a new weapon in a sense of in his arsenal, more or less. So I think once he kind of gets some games on the thing or get some games on film and teams start seeing it, that's kind of when they try to slow him down a little bit. But as far as September, you got to start fast. I mean, I think September really sets the tone. Everybody talks about winning games in December, which is obviously crucial. But September, essentially, that sets the tone for the entire season.
Yeah, and September is going to be, a tough couple of weeks for the Chiefs. They move on to week number 2 in Jacksonville versus a Jags team. And I really want to know your thoughts as a young quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. Started his first year off very rocky. Now he's got a guy in Doug Peterson who was, with the Kansas City Chiefs. Looks like they're on the way up in Jacksonville. Is Jacksonville for real in your eyes? You know what a quarterback looks like. You know what a good quarterback looks like. Are they for real under Trevor Lawrence?
I think so. I mean, I definitely, at the end of the day, you look back at all the teams that have won Super Bowls or been good teams, more or less, they've always had a good quarterback at the helm. The teams that have had a mediocre quarterback, essentially they got a good running game and a great defense, from that standpoint. But having somebody like Trevor, I think the biggest thing for Trevor, and I could be wrong, but just on the outside looking in, I think his first year, I think the biggest thing was the transition of the did I lose you there? Oh, was the transition of the terminology and the speed of the game comes from Clemson. I think that's where, he obviously had a guy, what was the head coach that was there from Ohio State?
Urban Meyer?
Urban Meyer, yeah. So when he came in there his rookie year, I think it was pretty much he was still kind of almost running the college, somewhat offense.
Right.
And now he's got somebody like Doug Peterson has actually set him down, helped him understand the game. I mean, he's a phenomenal athlete. He's got the arm, he's got his feet as far as if he needs to move. But he's got some weapons around him too. And I think that's going to be one of those things. And he's got a good defense. So, without the 4 turnovers last year in the playoffs, I definitely think the game he threw 4 interceptions, they ended up winning that.
That's
right.
They actually won in the Chargers. So yeah,
that's right.
Played well against the Chiefs. Was able to come back versus the Chargers. Played really well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd love to see. I mean, I think that'll be a good game as far as going down to Jacksonville, on the road in a sense, to being able to, at least we have the September side, or as far as, with Patrick Mahomes having a good September. But I look to see that being a good game for the Kansas City Chiefs down there.
Yeah, I can't wait to be at that one as a Florida guy. Can't wait to go see the Chiefs play the Jags. That's a team that's up and coming. Then we move on to week 4 and 5 as the New York Jets. Is it finally going to be where Patrick Mahomes plays Aaron Rodgers? We've been waiting for the State Farm Bowl for a long time with him and the Packers, but it looks like we're finally going to get a Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers Bowl. And that's another team I think has some question marks. A lot of people are calling them the Denver Broncos of last year, how they may not pan out because Aaron Rodgers is quote unquote washed. A lot of people saying, do you think the Jets can possibly be a team right there with the Bills to win that division? How are you feeling about the Jets going into this season?
I mean, when you got a guy like Aaron Rodgers at the helm, I mean, he's accurate. He takes care of that. He doesn't have a lot of turnovers. So, right then and there, I mean, they had some good games last year that, essentially they could have won there. But obviously it slipped away essentially from turnovers from the QB position. But I think having a guy like Aaron with a team that surrounds him like that, I think they could definitely make a decent run. I mean, it's hard to go from whatever 3 or 4 wins they had last year or whatever it was,
Right.
turning around and being a playoff contender. That's the odds are always against you. But when you have a guy like Aaron Rodgers who doesn't seem like he lost too much of a step last year, kind of thing. I mean, Drew Brees kind of the tail end of his career, you could see that he was losing some velocity on the ball. Somebody like Peyton Manning, they were losing velocity, but Aaron Rodgers can still spin it with the best. Even, Tom Brady, that was one thing that was still crazy. I mean, he's 45 years old, still, as strong as arm as ever kind of thing. But, at the end of the day, I think if Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy, it's definitely going to give, the Jets a good chance for this year and everything.
Yeah, that's a week 4 game in New York. What do the Chiefs have to do to slow down a guy like Aaron Rodgers? The last time they played him was in Kansas City, and I mean, he was just dropping dimes all over him. So what are some of the things, if you are Steve Spagnuolo, to slow down the New York Jets?
I think at the end of the day, it's kind of one of those things to where, bring some pressure in a sense to kind of get him off his spot. A lot of times when he's having to run and, he can make plays with his feet and whatnot. But I think when Aaron can just sit back there and pick you apart, that's to me is when Aaron's at his best. Does he, like I said, does he make plays when he gets outside the pocket? Yes, he does. But, if you're going to sit there and let him stand on his spot and pick you apart with his arm, then, I think it's going to be a long game in a sense. So to me, bringing pressure, which, Steve Spagnuolo has been known to do that. But, it seemed like the Chiefs obviously went out, in the draft and pretty much went all kind of defense. So it's kind of one of those things to where continue and if you get Chris Jones back, guys like that, having those guys around, it's going to be great for the defense to be able to get after a quarterback.
Yeah, definitely exciting to see what the defense is. Sure, a lot of good rookies coming in, a lot of guys from last year coming back this year had good seasons. So it'll be interesting what the defense brings because we know what the offense is going to be. So it'll be interesting to see a high-powered offense like the Jets to see how we can slow them down. Another high-powered offense team, you were drafted by the Minnesota Vikings in Week 5 in Minnesota. What do the Chiefs got to do to slow down a guy like Jamar Chase? Because you also have a guy like Jamar Chase trying to match up against these young corners versus Jamar
You mean
Chase.
Jefferson,
what would be the
right? You mean
I'm sorry. Yeah, Justin Jefferson, not Jamar Chase. Yeah, Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
Justin Jefferson. How would you slow down Justin Jefferson?
I don't think you can really slow him down. I think you got to limit the big plays, in my opinion. Don't let him get the big plays over the top because, if you continue to get the big plays and they've got the momentum and that crowd there in that dome in Minnesota, I think it's one of those things to where that plays in the Vikings' favor from that standpoint. I think so. It's limit the big plays for Justin Jefferson, and that gives you the chance more or less, especially on the road.
Yeah, and Minnesota is a tough place to play. Their fans get very loud. I mean, they did lose Dalvin Cook. That's a loss for them. They still got T.J. Hawkinson up there. Do you see them taking a step down a little bit, the Minnesota Vikings, because of Detroit, or do you still think they can still compete in that division?
I definitely think they, as far as that, I mean, they've been there at the top pretty much with Green Bay every year. And a guy like, God, I'm drawing a blank. Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
A guy like him at the helm. I mean, he's not. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be your Super Bowl winning quarterback, but he's going to continue to take care of the ball and win you some games or whatever.
He'll be like an Alex Smith type guy. He's always going to be there for you.
That's it, exactly. You know what you're going to get with him. So, I think as long as he's there, he stays healthy and he's got the weapons around him. As far as losing Dalvin Cook, to me, I think the running back position is one of those that you can find a guy in the draft and a 5th or 6th round guy that is going to come out and be rookie of the year kind of as long as he's in the right type of offense. But being able, the biggest thing I think for, in the running back room in the sense is, having guys that can rotate in and out, especially if you don't have your big name guy anymore.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to ask you is when you played, the running back position was a lot different than it was now. You played with Jamal Charles, Larry Johnson, great running backs, and you had to kind of have a great running back then to win games. Do you think it's more or less now shifting to you kind of have to have a really good quarterback and a really good head coach to be either deep into the playoffs and win a Super Bowl, or can you still win a Super Bowl with a guy kind of like Kirk Cousins and a good run game?
I don't know. It's one of those things where, I think it's tough. The game is definitely transitioned in a sense to where it's a pass happy league. I think it's a lot more fun to watch in that sense. Nobody wants to see the 3 yards in a cloud of dust, old school way.
Right.
But, it's one of those things to where the thing I see a lot of teams run into that problem is, when you have to have that 4-minute offense where you've got to sit there and you've got to run the clock out, teams struggle with that because they don't have that hard-nosed run game in a sense. They've got the kind of scat back that's mainly a back that can get out of the backfield and make plays receiving-wise. You've got to be able to have those bruisers like a LeGarrette Blount kind of, for instance, or whatever, that can actually – or right. What was the guy from LSU?
Leonard Fournette.
Leonard Fournette. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Guys like that just somehow always seem to fall forward kind of thing. But, at the end of the day, that's just one of those things to where Andy Reid's not afraid to throw for it, with 4 minutes left because he trusts Patrick Mahomes to make a play from that standpoint too.
Yeah, and the running back position 10 years ago, you had to kind of have a dominant running back on roster. Even though I like Pacheco. Pacheco is a very good back for the Chiefs, and you have Jerick McKinnon, like you just said, a guy who can receive the ball out of the backfield. And of course, again, the way he schemes his wide receivers sometimes to come out of the backfield and catch and pitch it and things like that. That's almost a run for Andy Reid.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing, it's hard to scheme. When you have different, because Andy Reid, for the most part, he's always, to the offense, it might still be the same similar formation, but to the defense, It looks completely different. So that's the thing. Andy always knows what, the offense knows what they're doing. The defense is the one who has to adjust to it. Sometimes you can get too fancy on offenses and you actually end up beating yourself. But I think Andy does a great job of coaching those guys and helping them learn and understanding the game of football.
Yeah. And especially when you have, again, the relationship of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. So if he does want to pass under 4 minutes, something like that, he knows he can trust them to run the right plays, get it to the right guys that he knows that aren't going to try to do the most and just really eat the clock. But as we move on here in the schedule, something I wanted to get your opinion on is the return of Tyreek Hill, week number 9 in Germany. This game sold out in 14 minutes. This looks like it is a big, big game. A lot of people want to go to. I don't really want to say revenge game for Tyreek Hill, but there's been a lot of banter going on between the two. Is this one of the games, if you're the Chiefs, you have circled on your schedule?
Yeah, I think it is. But I think, at the end of the day, I think the Chiefs are, to me, I wouldn't necessarily say you circle it. Obviously you want to win it, but it's like, hey, we got rid of you, got some draft picks, and we went and won the Super Bowl. Right. So to me, it's like kind of like we didn't really need you kind of thing. So, but I think it's one of those things to where the Chiefs really want to win the game because when you lose a guy like that, obviously you won't bragging rights, especially for somebody who's vocal as as Tyreek has been about the whole situation and everything. So, that's going to be a tough game. Just any kind of traveling across seas, you have to pick up and pretty much move the whole facility essentially because you're over there practicing all week. And you're away from your families, or some families might travel and whatnot. But I think the biggest thing, the team to me with the most experience in being able to do that, I think is right now to me is Kansas City. It's just like Super Bowl week. You're in whatever Super Bowl city is for the whole week. So the Chiefs to me have that advantage as far as from that standpoint over Miami. But at the end of the day, I think Miami's got some good things going on as well down there. But if they can't keep that guy at the helm down there, Tua, if they can't keep him healthy, they don't stand a chance, in my opinion.
Yeah, and if Tua can't, I really would like to see Tua healthy and playing in that game. because that's going to be a good game. Tyreek Hill going up against his former team. Then they hit the bye week. The Chiefs hit the bye week. And this is what I thought was really interesting this point of the season is because after the bye week, and you have the schedule there in front of you, you see the team they play after the bye week. That is the Philadelphia Eagles. And a lot of Eagles fans, this is a game I looked at, I should say, and I kind of said, I don't know if the Chiefs, win again versus the Eagles at that point in the season. They may be, coming back from Germany. But Andy Reid off of a bye week is a guy that just his game plans are ridiculous after a bye week. He's only lost, I think, 3 or 4 games in his entire career after the bye week. Going up against the Super Bowl rematch, what are some of your thoughts about that Monday night game versus the Eagles?
I mean, the first thought is, when you say like Andy Reid essentially is, 3 or 4 games after that he's only lost, when you give a guy like a mastermind offensive guy like that time, that, an extra week essentially to prepare for a team, they might not be preparing fully for, essentially the Eagles throughout that, the bye week practices more or less. But I can promise you when they walk off the field, when they go in the meeting rooms, they're already planning, game planning against the Eagles. A lot of times in the bye week, that's kind of a week that you want to get your starters healthy. So you let your backups kind of go out there and do their walkthroughs or, run the practices in a sense, because that's a chance for those guys to actually get some reps. Because during the season, the backup guys, they don't get many reps. So, that's a chance for those guys mid-season to actually get out there and practice and get some reps while you let your starters rest, even though they're still going to be out at practice doing your individuals and all that. The biggest thing you want to do for your starters that week during the bye week is actually to get some rest.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, with rest, I think this is the perfect time to play a high-powered team in the Eagles because they're coming off of the Sunday game in Miami, so they're already going to have that whole week off plus an extra day because of the Monday night game. So I think that's a huge advantage when this schedule came out, looking where the Eagles are, playing them right then and there. It's like, you couldn't ask for a better way the schedule could have came out, playing that Super Bowl rematch. And I'm excited for that. There was a lot of stuff that went on with the, quote unquote call at the end of the game and that Super Bowl. A lot of people had opinion on that. And then after that, this is when they really get into the nitty gritty part of their schedule.
Yeah, and Jaden, to touch base on the more or less the Philly game that kind of didn't touch on it. I was just thinking, it just hit me. To me, this game means more to Philly than it does to Kansas City, because Kansas City essentially already won the Super Bowl. So, to me, if you lose this game, I don't think it's life or death. I think the media might run with it. Oh, the Eagles are better now, da da da. But at the end of the day, I think that the Chiefs, continue to play your game, but me, there's going to be a edge or a chip on the Eagles' shoulder, essentially coming in to essentially win the game, because obviously you got beat last year in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and like you said, the pressure is on the Eagles. It's going to be on the Eagles because the Chiefs won when it mattered. Same with Bengals fans. They say you're 1-3 versus us. You're 1-3 versus us. Well, we just beat you when it mattered to win a Super Bowl. So I agree. The pressure, it will be on the Eagles. A very good team, very, very good team. But the pressure will be on them in Monday night in Kansas City. They will be in Kansas City. So it'll be another version of the Kelsey Bowl. Looking forward to that. But, like I said, getting to the nitty-gritty part of the season. Week 14, we play another one of your former teams, the Buffalo Bills in Kansas City. This is another team that's kind of like a rival, like we have the Bengals, it's starting to brew up like the Eagles a little bit, but you have the Bengals, you have the Bills. Why have the Chiefs kind of struggled versus the Bills in the regular season the last couple of years, but in the playoffs, it's kind of there's a difference. There's a different play style from the Chiefs, especially on defense, than there's a regular season. Is there really any rhyme or reason to it, or do you just think that's just how it is?
Well, I think who did they beat to go to the Super Bowl in 2019? The Bills, right?
So in 2020, they beat the Bills to go to the Super Bowl, and then in 2021, the 13. But 2013, they had the 13 seconds. So I think twice in the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think that's another instance of they've lost the year before to the Bill, or they beat the Bills the year before, so therefore the Bills now have that chip on their shoulder of, hey, we need to come here and prove our point, and beat them, essentially. But to me, obviously, every game matters to the Chiefs, and those guys.
Right.
But it's one of those things. Sometimes, other locker rooms, those games matter even more to those guys, on the other side of it, because, hey, we got embarrassed in the playoffs, or we lost the playoff game essentially that could have, sent us to the Super Bowl kind of thing. So, as far as I would say, that's probably one of the biggest thing is, to me, it doesn't matter losing that game during the regular season, because it matters winning the game in the playoffs. Like you said,
Yeah.
against the Bengals, you're 1-3, but yeah, guess what? We won the game that mattered, and we won went to the Super Bowl.
Right.
So to me, I think that's the biggest thing, the biggest difference. Sometimes these guys look at that one game during the regular season as their Super Bowl, but in reality, the Chiefs, who have been up at the top for the past, 5 or 6 years, they expect to win. They expect to be in the playoffs every year, and they expect to do well.
Right. And one thing I was going to ask you is when they do go play a team like the Bills, and they may have the playoff success for them, is a lot of people try to criticize Andy Reid for when he plays a team he may think he plays in the playoffs. And I don't know if this is the case or not, but I really wanted to get your opinion on it. Do you think Andy Reid doesn't throw the entire, quote unquote, kitchen sink at them during the regular season? Because he knows we're going to see Joe Burrow, we're going to see Josh Allen in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean that could very well be the case. I mean that's a good point. I don't know if I've ever really heard somebody say that. But I think that's. I mean, I don't think it's Andy Reid's not going out there to throw the game. But I think a lot of times Andy Reid's out there, obviously calling his offense. But I think when it comes playoff time, it's almost like he elevates his play calling to a whole other level. But I think his quarterback elevates his game to a whole nother level as well, a lot of times too. So at the end of the day, the Chiefs or whoever's preparing against the Chiefs, they might go back and watch that game when they previously played them, but they're watching the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever. They're obviously play from instead of watching that previous game. They're going to watch the previous game when they played them, but they're watching their last 4 weeks because essentially that's mainly what, teams are preparing for usually.
Yeah, and Andy Reid, again, he has a snow globe. He's got a lot of plays in the playbook. So there may be times in the regular season where he's not going to unload, his entire playbook. But I don't think Andy Reid, if he has a play that he needs a run to win a game, he's going to hold back against the Bills or against a team like that.
Absolutely. There's no question on that.
Yeah, and then, we move on to, we got New England week 15, and then there's the New Year's Eve game. I am very intrigued with a team we just talked about. It's kind of the big time rivalry in the NFL right now. A lot of back and forth between these two teams. The Cincinnati Bengals versus the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know about you, but just as purely as a Chiefs standpoint, it used to be kind of the Raiders and the Broncos, but now we kind of own those teams. So the rivalry is not there as much. What has this rivalry been like, especially just for the NFL standpoint, between the Chiefs and for the Bengals?
Oh, I mean, it's just two great teams playing football. It usually always comes down to, whichever team has the ball last more times than not. And which, to me as a football fan, I mean, you can't ask for any more than that. Everybody always asks, you pull for the Chiefs, you pull for the Dolphins or the Bills. And I'm like, I'll pull for those teams. Clearly, whatever, but at the end of the day, I want to watch a game come down to the fourth quarter drive where the quarterback has the ball. He's down by 4. He's got to drive down, score a touchdown, or he's down by 2. He's got to get his team in position. Those are the situations as a quarterback that you practice throughout the entire year. Every more or less during OTAs, during training camp, you're going to always have your 2-minute drills, at the end of practice. So those are the things that, to me, as a quarterback, and that comes back to these games because it's always pretty much come down to the wire for these games the last time they played or the last couple of times they played. So as far as it becoming a rivalry, I think it's just one of those things to where you've got a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who's, one of the top quarterbacks, a guy like Joe Burrow. So it's always going to be hyped up. It's always going to be talked about. And, those are those two teams have been, for the past 2 years and, essentially the last 4 teams standing kind of thing.
Yeah, and Joe Burrow, I mean, you can love him or hate him. He's a really, really good quarterback. He's shown why, he's right up there with Patrick Mahomes. In your opinion, do you think the Bengals going into this season are the biggest threat for the Kansas City Chiefs, or do you have another team in mind?
I would say, I mean, honestly, as crazy as it sounds, I think the Chiefs are the biggest threat to the Chiefs kind of thing,
Really?
standpoint. I mean, I do think that, when you look outside of that, I mean, at the end of the day, they control their own destiny, in my opinion, especially, if they can stay healthy, they're going to be right back up there pretty much in the AFC Championship. But, as far as I would say the Bengals would be one of those teams. The Buffalo Bills, I don't feel like they kind of, they're still going to be, a good football team as long as they've got Josh Allen there at the helm making the plays that he makes. But, a team, I would say, like, just to answer your question, I would say the Bengals would be the biggest threat for them just because they've proven the last 2 years that they belong there. Especially, obviously losing the Super Bowl, but, last year in the AFC Championship, it's just one of those things to where, until they prove us otherwise, where they don't make it back there, I think they essentially are the biggest threat and for the Chiefs this year.
Yeah, and again, they're always going to be there. They're always going to be competing, even with teams like the Ravens. I mean, every time you think the Bengals may be down at a certain point of the season, they may be losing a couple of games. They're just like the cockroach that never dies. They just keep coming back, and even early in games, when we're up on them, they just keep coming back. I just think they have a really good quarterback and they have a really good system over there. Like you said, the Bills too, but it just seems like lately there's been a lot of turmoil going on with the Bills, and maybe if it's Diggs not wanting to be there and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm not in that locker room.
Yeah.
But a lot of things going on with the Buffalo Bills, and you have teams like the Jets and the Ravens that are on their way up. But I think the Bengals are also there too, and some of the teams in our division are also there too, like the Chargers. You have a team like the Chargers and Justin Herbert.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and those teams are, they're just kind of waiting to, start clicking and firing on all cylinders. That, the past 2 years, Justin Herbert's played really well. So I definitely think he's one of those things that, this definitely, I wouldn't say it could be the year for them, but those are teams that you're going to have to. You can't just, get caught off guard. You can't get caught sleeping, essentially. Anytime you play a divisional rival, it doesn't matter. I mean, I feel like records. Anytime you play the Raiders, I feel like division records go out, or records just go out the window, kind of thing, because there's always that heated rivalry.
Right. Yeah. And again, even the Broncos. The Broncos haven't beat the Chiefs since 2015. But again, it's still the Broncos. They're still going to be there at the end of the day.
That's it.
So it's the AFC West. It's the AFC right now, one of the most competitive we've ever seen in the history of the National Football League. As we move on here, before we start wrapping things up, a question I wanted to ask you is, the Kansas City Chiefs just came off the Super Bowl. They're riding high. How do the Chiefs, coming off a Super Bowl in the year they just had, stay focused, have that mentality of going to go get another one? Because it is really hard in the NFL. It hasn't been done in almost 20 years. How do they stay focused?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is you gotta block the outside noise out. And at the end of the day, it's your veterans in that locker room are the ones that, you kind of got to have amnesia. You got to forget about last year, because last year's over with. You can't, everybody's wanting to knock you off because you were the Super Bowl champion. So you're going to, for the most part, you almost get everybody's Super Bowl kind of game in a sense. But I think at the end of the day, you just got to stay grounded. You got to, when you've got a veteran and Patrick Mahomes that's, at the helm, I think at the end of the day, it's kind of one of those things to where if you can block out the noise on the outside and, because there's going to be, they'll lose, as soon as they lose the first game or whatever game in the season, they're going to be like, oh God, here we go. It's one of those things. So it's being able to block out the outside noise and actually just worry about the guys that are in that locker room, because that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's more so as like you said, and I think that's a very good point, is you're going to get every team's Super Bowl. Like you're like the Lions, that's going to be their Super Bowl if they beat the Jags. That's going to be their Super Bowl. You're going to have their fans going crazy. You get to knock off the Kansas City Chiefs.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no question. And I mean, that's usually, it always happens that way. I mean, when we played, more or less whatever team we were playing, they had won the Super Bowl the year before, that means that not that all the games don't mean something, but who doesn't want to be the first one to knock off the Chiefs, essentially being the defending Super Bowl champion.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. And like you just said, you guys went in 2008 to the Patriots. that first week, and they hadn't lost a game in over a year. So it's like and you guys came close to beating them that year. So it's like you're gonna get those teams every year to come close to giving them everything you got. The Bears, the Jets, the Broncos. Some of these teams you may not think are high up on there, but you can't go into those weeks thinking, oh, we're the Kansas City Chiefs. Those are the teams. And I think, like you said earlier, that's the Chiefs. The only thing to me, I think they're better than the Bengals. I think they're better than the Jets, the Ravens, whoever it may be. But is it up here? Is it you can't let yourself beat yourself? I think that's the biggest thing for the Chiefs.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's week in and week out. You can't look past any team, even when the Lions were 0-16 back in 2008, I believe it was.
Right.
I promise you, those guys in that locker room were fighting every single week to try and win that one game. If you go back and look at that schedule, I'm pretty sure of the 16 losses they had, I'm almost certain that 11 or 12 of them were less than 3 points. So it wasn't like they were getting blown out every single week. And it's the NFL. I mean, it's any given Sunday. There's a reason that movie was made, because you just never know, what team's going to show up in a sense.
Yeah, and I agree. And as long as the Kansas City Chiefs stay focused with some of the guys they have, they're going to do very, very well this season. I think they can get right back there to the Super Bowl. As we continue here on the TPT podcast, one of the last things we want to do here is there any players on the Kansas City Chiefs you look forward to seeing this season? Obviously, you have Kelsey, you have Mahomes, you have Chris Jones. But is there any guys that haven't really been talked about that you can maybe pinpoint, say, I'm excited to see this guy on the field?
I mean, I think the biggest one, I mentioned him earlier. I think if Justin Ross, I really think if he can be healthy, I think he's going to be a game changer. What's the guy that played with Jamar Chase? This opposite of him. What's his name? From Clemson.
T. Higgins.
T. Higgins. Like
T. Higgins,
he and Justin Ross played together. Both of them were phenomenal in that when they ended up with when they won the national championship or whatever. So it's just one of those things that, like, a guy like him that's kind of flying under the radar right now, if he can actually stay healthy, I think things could take off for him. So he'd be somebody that I want to watch. Hopefully can stay healthy and things can take off for him.
Yeah, and we've seen him in practice and even OTAs. He's looked really well. I think the smart thing for the Chiefs last year was he was maybe 85% healthy, but they know what this guy can be. What he looked like his freshman year at Clemson and how he dominated an Alabama defense that half these guys we're talking about on that Alabama defense are in the NFL and playing at a high level. So I think if Justin Ross can get back to that level, I would love to see him in this Chiefs offense with Patrick Mahomes. Even if he's a 700-800 yard guy with a couple of touchdowns, that's huge for the Chiefs. That's all they need, because you already have a guy in Travis Kelce. You have MVS. You have Kadarius Toney. You have these guys that can produce. So if he can be a guy that comes in when those guys are nicked up to come in and be an impact player, that's honestly the guy I'm looking forward to see. Is there any guys on defense you're looking forward to see?
I hope they aren't in there with Chris Jones. Are they working the contract out with him right now?
So that's something I'm curious to see is Chris Jones. It's Brett Veach, and a lot of fans, a lot of people, they trust Brett Veach to get the contract done, for the Kansas City Chiefs. So I'm very interested to see what type of contract they do with Chris Jones, because a lot of people think they do get that contract done with Chris Jones. In my opinion, I think DeAndre Hopkins is in, reaching distance. If it's a more of a team-friendly deal with Chris Jones, that means it saves some cap right now, so you can go get a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. Do I think they need a guy like that? No, but I think it's very much a possibility.
I promise you it'll help you, though. There's no question on that.
Yes, right. Yeah, it'll always help you having a guy like that on your roster.
That's it. Exactly. As far as defense, it's I guess Ladarius Sneed. How long has he been there? I feel like.
Yeah, so this will be his last year of his contract.
Okay, all right. So, there's really nobody on defense as far as, I just, there's no really big time name guys, which at the end of the day, it's kind of one of those things to where, you're a defense is playing together as a unit. You don't have any, besides, a guy like Chris Jones,
right,
line, but at the end of the day, you've got a bunch of guys that are out there playing football.
Right. Yeah. And again, a collective group of young guys who are riding their veteran in Chris Jones, phenomenal year last year. And I think if they kind of have that formula again, if the rookies keep playing how they're playing, we played 11 rookies in the Super Bowl, first time that's ever been done. So that's a big thing if we can get those guys going for the Kansas City Chiefs. To wrap up the show at the TPT podcast, Tyler, something fun we like to do here is ask you, do you have a favorite story or maybe your welcome to the NFL moment when you're on the Chiefs or when you're coming in for the Vikings? What is a story you'd like to share? Maybe you haven't shared here on the TPT podcast.
I think there's two. I think the first time, coming from a small school at Coastal, I think our biggest crowd was like 8,000 or 9,000 fans, maybe 10,000 one game. We played JMU and beat them. They were the number one team in the nation. But I think coming off, I'd just gotten traded to, or not traded, but picked up by Kansas City. We go on the road. We lose to Houston, and we lost to Chicago. And our first home game in Arrowhead against the Minnesota Vikings, which was my former team that I was drafted by. I remember going in at a halftime and just my ears were ringing. Like it was that loud in Arrowhead. So like being then now and compared to what it is now, I mean, it's just, I can only imagine it's even that much more loud. So that was a kind of a welcome to the NFL, like being around a crowd size that big and that loud, just going in the locker room and your ears are ringing. But I tell you, my rookie year, we were playing, Damon Hewer was quarterback, and we were playing against San Diego Chargers at San Diego. And a guy by the name of Sean Merriman sacks Damon, comes back, stands pretty much in the middle of the field and does his light switch. I'm telling you, I mean, I looked over at, Brody Kroll, who's standing beside me. I'm like, it's kind of one of those, moments or whatever. Like that was pretty hype kind of thing. But, as far as from my personal, I didn't really play my rookie year kind of thing. So there's really no, welcome to the NFL as far as for me.
Yeah. I mean, the lights out celebration, even if it is the San Diego Chargers, that is pretty electric. This is a play I want to ask you about is 2008, you're playing the Buccaneers and you have a receiving touchdown.
Yeah.
And who came up with, who implemented that play? Because I personally don't know Herm Edwards, but I don't know if that's a Herm Edwards type play.
No, that's definitely a Chan Gailey. Okay. It was one of those things where I always joked about it. I was like, we got to put a throwback to the quarterback in. And we had started running some of that, some of the Wildcat offense with Jamal Charles.
Right.
We pretty much, during that week, they finally, were like, all right, we're going to put it in. And, it was my job essentially was to kind of come off the line and essentially let the DB shoot the, more or less inside and kind of try to make a play, whatever, on the run game. And then after we had ran 2 plays in the Wildcat, pretty much I had said to Coach Gailey, I was like, they're not respecting me. They're just shooting inside. And sure enough, obviously we ran the play, and actually Jamal kind of almost fumbled the ball or pitched it to Bradley or whatever.
Mark Bradley. Yeah.
Mark Bradley. He kind of fumbled the ball. So I think too, that kind of, what's his name? Barber. Rondé Barber pretty much saw him kind of fumbling the ball. So he took off. And at that point, I pretty much, as soon as he went, I was gone. And, when Mark, it was actually funny because the first day on Wednesday of practice that week, I actually dropped the pass or whatever in practice or whatever. And I was just embarrassed at that point. I'm like, there's no way that they're ever going to call it. And obviously I called it in Fridays, kind of run through practice or whatever. But it was one of those things where it just ended up working out perfect. So that was pretty special moment. I got people that always ask me about that. So that was pretty special for me.
Yeah, a big time touchdown. One of the longest receiving passes out of a quarterback in NFL history. So that's always a good one. I see that on my timeline of the Mark Bradley, almost fumbling it, almost ruined the play, but luckily you caught it. But what was going through your mind as you saw the ball coming towards you? Were you thinking, "Do not drop this pass"?
No, I really wasn't. I was just sitting there thinking this is touchdown because, or more or less, I was saying, "Mark, don't overthrow me," kind of thing. But I mean, he threw a perfect ball, and I was able to catch it. And honestly, when I caught it, I went running. I kind of running to go into the stands, and this is kind of when the NFL started doing more of a fine system. And I was like, if I jump in the stands, they're going to find me. So I kind of jumped up the stands. And as I'm doing that, I don't want to lose any money. So I've kind of pushed myself back out or whatever, instead of jumping in the stands kind of thing.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite moments in Chiefs history is just that long pass versus the Bucks. Another one I was going to ask you about is you played in that game versus Miami later in the season, one of the coldest games in NFL history. Is that one of the coldest games you've ever played?
Oh, no questions asked. I mean, it was whenever you come off the field, I mean, I remember the announcers pretty much were like, "Oh, there's a guy from Coastal Carolina, from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina." That, I mean, I was pretty much just wrapped up. In the last drive of the game, actually, we had gotten the ball back, and I literally in there trying to call the plays. My teeth were chattering. I was so cold, and I couldn't get warm. Like I was just chatting. My teeth were chattering, from that standpoint. So it was definitely the coldest game. But for the most part, even though it's kind of one of those things, the scoreboard stopped working, like the play clock stopped working, I believe. They had pretty much made an announcement for all the fans up in the upper deck to pretty much come down to the lower deck, essentially to kind of use body heat in a sense from that standpoint. But it was definitely one of those games. But until you kind of got in the shade in a sense, once the sun kind of had gone down. Before that, it wasn't that bad because the sun was shining. So, you still had the heat from the sun, even though it was, whatever temperature it was on the field. But as long as you were moving and running around, it was kind of one of those things to where if you were in that moment, I can imagine for the guys that were standing on the sideline throughout the whole game, I'm sure they were just stiff as a brick.
Wow. And the last question I was going to ask you before we officially wrap this up is you played with a lot of great players in your playing days. If you had to pick 2 players to play with on offense, who would it be?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Let's see. I say offense for one, Tony Gonzalez. There's no question on that. I played with some great receivers in Dwayne Bowe and Brandon Marshall. And honestly, I mean, I looking back, I mean, being that I played, I would say Dwayne Bowe. Another guy that didn't get to play a lot when I was there in 2008, but you saw what he did, obviously, after I left when I got traded, was Jamal Charles. We had a guy like Larry Johnson who had just gotten paid that essentially that's why we ran the pistol was because Larry was better from kind of an I formation. He wasn't a guy that could run sideways like Jamal Charles could. So as far as that, that was one of those things to where, I wish he would have got to play more, but being that they were paying Larry so much money, it's kind of one of those things where we had to do what we did with Larry from that standpoint. But I think we could have done a little bit more if we'd had Jamal Charles back there.
Yeah, Jamal Charles, personally, one of my favorite players back in the day when the Chiefs were not doing what they do now. He was the main reason to watch a Chiefs game was to run out of that backfield and just absolute go, along with Larry Johnson as well. Such a great player. Tony Gonzalez. Yeah, Tony Gonzalez. You can't go wrong with Tony Gonzalez. Travis Kelce. He's going to be up there at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Right there with.
And I'm sure he'll probably break some of Tony's records, but like Tony would probably say, records are made to be broken. But it's definitely a different game now. The way they throw the ball more than what it was when Tony played.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not going to – and he played in a run-style offense. He was not in a offense where you're just passing the ball. So
that's it.
I mean, cornerbacks and safeties, thank God he didn't do that.
To do what Tony did and put up the numbers he did in those kind of offenses, that's pretty special. I think that says a lot about Tony. But, you can't take credit away from Travis Kelce for what he's doing. But, Tony wasn't really in a spread offense other than I think my second year in 2008 because we spread it out. And obviously he had a 1,000-yard year that year as well. So I think that was one of the things that was riding on the line. They were like, we got to get him 1,000 yards, got to give him 1,000 yards kind of thing.
Yeah, such a great player. And now you got a guy like Travis Kelce who gets 1,000 yards almost after every season. That'll do it for today's episode, guys. Appreciate you coming on the show, Tyler. Absolute honor having you on here. Such a great information for the Kansas City Chiefs in this upcoming season.
I appreciate you having me, man. It's always a great time. We'll do it again soon.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it. All right, guys, that'll do it for the TPT podcast. I will see you guys next time on the TPT podcast.